I'd like to call this Finance Committee meeting to order. The first item we have on the agenda is assignment for request for council action and discussion. For the Finance Committee, we have 13-197 budget amendments, 13-198, 2014 material bids, 13-199 increase of PO, advances law enforcement police, 13-200 RFPs, drug screen and related professional services, 13-201 waiver of uncollectible utility accounts, 13-202 Medina Creative Housing, 406 South Broadway property, 13-203 authorizing payment greater than $3,000, 13-204 authorizing payment greater than $3,000, 13-205 expenditure over $25,000 wing foot tire systems, and 13-206 bids for Damon Drive storm sewer improvements. First, next item on the agenda is 13-172. This is an amendment to the fire services contract for Montville Township. Mayor?
Yes, sir. Just a couple changes that were intentional, and then, well, they were all intentional, but one was a correction. Number 2, under the terms and conditions, we intended it to be a 5-year contract, but our math wasn't so good. Previously, it said December 31st, 2017, which would have made it a 6-year contract, because 12 was actually the first year. So we corrected that. On the second page, under capital purchases, in C, we used to have $40,000 in years 2015 and 2016, and the request of Montville was that if they bought a second truck at a cost of $385,000, if the city would remove the two $40,000 payments in 15 and 16 because of that capital expenditure. I talked to John about it a little bit, Mr. Huber and I, and felt that council would accept that because it's $80,000 versus $385,000. They did ask, just in the interest of full disclosure, they did ask that the 2015 and 2016 standby fees be reduced to $125,000, and I told them I wasn't comfortable with bringing that to council because when we're passing our budgets, that's part of the revenue expectation, and I didn't think we should do that, so we left that in. And then I think the last thing was the due date. They asked that the city add that second sentence in the paragraph of D that states that we'll invoice in the month of January, and they'll have 30 days to pay it. Other than that, the contract is exactly as it was, and I respectfully ask that you accept the changes. They've already passed it at their trustee meeting.
Questions?
Move to approve.
Second. And I don't believe this does not need the emergency clause, because it's, okay. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. 13-197, budget amendments. Who's this from? Mayor, that's a shoot?
Patrick.
It's Pat, but we don't do carryover in the railroad renovation fund, but they didn't spend this last year and they need it this year, so they're asking to reappropriate it.
Okay.
Move to approve. Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. 13-198, 2014 material bids. Mr. Pacoli?
Thank you. This is our annual bid for aggregate, concrete, sands, mason type material. We even include salt and also the cold water meters, even though we secured a decent price for salt this year. It's the lowest it's been, $34.20 per ton, so same bid as we always put out in the fall.
Questions?
Move to approve. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Motion carries. 13-199, expenditure over $15,000 to increase PO for the police department. Lieutenant?
Yeah, this is a increase in the blanket PO for ammunition that we're using at our training facility.
Questions?
What have we spent in previous years? I know the gun range has been there, what, 3 years, 2 years? Do you have any idea?
About 3 years, no, I don't.
We have increased Mark, we have increased the training for a while. They had cut back, and the state requires that you qualify once a year.
Once a year.
And I wasn't satisfied with that, to keep the skills up and keep people more in tune with what we would expect should they have to use their weapons. So we began training more frequently with each of the guns. So as a result of that, we're going through more ammo.
Other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. 13200 RFPs for drug screening and related services. Dawn?
This is, we do this every year. Our current contract is with any lab test now, and it expires December 31st.
And you need the emergency clause here?
Yes, please.
If it expires December 31st, what's the emergency clause do?
Because we have to advertise for the bids, and that takes some time.
Questions?
Move to approve with the emergency clause.
Second, including emergency clause?
All in favor with the emergency clause?
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. 13201, waiver of uncollectible utility accounts. Mr. Durham.
Thank you, Mr. Coyne. The list of the accounts is on the second page. These are foreclosures, bankruptcies, and sheriff sales, except for there's a couple, 3 of them on there that are just too small to really be worth going after. And one I do want to explain, it says uncollectible per comments. This was a equipment failure on our equipment. We had shut off the water because the owner had asked for it to be shut off, and our valve did not close. So there was water use while it was vacant. The system generated a bill for that, but there was no person there. The previous owner had already asked to have it shut off, and the new owner hadn't come in yet. We've got to waive that because we don't have a customer. It was our equipment that failed. It's been replaced. I don't know if they got out there and had to replace our valve because of that. And then I did note on the request here, the rest of the old outstanding utility bills have been sent a notice that it will be placed on their property taxes if they don't pay by November 4th. We're going to send them to the county auditor's office at that time, and we'll collect them to the property taxes.
And what about Medina Lanes? What's,
It's a bankruptcy, we can't collect on it.
oh, it's a bankruptcy. All right, well, there's the answer.
So, and Keith, with regard to those properties that are rentals, it'll be the landlord or the property owner that's gonna be stuck with the bill.
It is, the same thing happens with a new purchaser too. If the old owner left us a bill, it's not always necessarily the person that used the water, it's whoever owns it currently.
Okay.
We send them a notice because we always tell them if you pay us, there's no additional fees. Once we send it to the county has fees they put on top of it, so they're better off to pay us, so we do send them a notice to give them an opportunity. Most of the, when people come in and buy it, they can check, and the title search people all frequently call us, and we've given them the email because it's easier for them that way. You just email us and ask us to check a place, and then they'll collect it in the escrow, so you don't have that. As far as the landlords, we do offer the option that landlords can require their tenants to pay a deposit to us, so a $100 deposit on the service. That helps them out somewhat.
So Keith, you said it transfers to the new owner, but with the bankruptcy, for instance, the bowling lanes, there's no recourse on that.
With the bankruptcy, we can't take any action to collect. The order we get from the federal bankruptcy court says that we can't take any action to collect that amount, so we're stuck.
So we receive that order then, correct?
Yes, we receive those all the time.
Yeah, I don't know if we can ever become a secured creditor in order to fall in line of any collections under the bankruptcy code. So we're unsecured, I would imagine, right? And
Yeah, we get nothing else.
we get whatever's left over, which is usually nothing.
The major change that we made to help with the bankruptcy somewhat is we have a $50 charge. We used to call it a turn-off charge. We changed its title to a turn-on charge a while ago. The reason was, a lot of times we get bankruptcies filed. If that's called a turn-off charge and their water is shut off and they file bankruptcy, we can't collect it because it's pre-bankruptcy. By changing that to a turn-on charge, when they come in with their bankruptcy statement and say, you gotta turn my water back on, we say, okay, that's fine, but you still have to pay us this $50 turn-on charge, because since it's a turn-on charge, it's post-bankruptcy, we can collect it. And that helps some, but that's all we can really do. Anything pre-bankruptcy, like John alluded to, you're stuck in with the unsecured creditors.
Other questions?
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. 13202, Medina Creative Housing, 406 South Broadway Street property. Mayor?
Diane's here, I think she'd like to speak to this.
Okay. Diane, welcome. Here you are.
Hi, I'm in the back. I did put a letter together and submit that to Mayor Hanwell. Hopefully, the committee has had a chance to look at that, to review the areas of consideration, some concern with the existing building, with the footprint that is left on the property, to do what we had hoped to do on that property. And I wanted to discuss that tonight because obviously we're committed to move forward with this project, but there are concerns with handicap accessibility, with cost to renovate. We will be held to a commercial building standard, and the footprint of the barn is now very small in light of the footprint of the parking area and the set off from the property line to build. So I wanted to discuss that tonight, obviously with the Finance Committee, to get your thoughts and hopefully come to some type of agreement, or at least a roadmap on where we go from here in light of these considerations.
Okay. Questions on the letter? I think we all received the letter and we had an opportunity to read the letter. So questions regarding the letter?
Well, I can give you my thoughts. My thoughts. First off, I guess I was disappointed when I got the letter because everything that you just mentioned was what it was in the very beginning when you looked at the project. I mean, the barn, the footprint, the parking lot, the condition of the house. And when we reconfigured the parking lot, I think to better serve what we understood to be your needs, because we thought it was a great idea, a great project. We reconfigured the parking lot to meet those needs. And when I looked at the letter and I looked at the cost for the house, I talked to some contractors, and first of all, the cost of some of that restoration seemed to be out of line, which may or may not be so, but it seemed awfully high. But even if it wasn't high, if it is, I think, was it $50,000?
Yeah, and that didn't include aesthetics, such as painting the house and things like that. That was basically the structure.
Right, that's okay.
And I did review those
Right.
with Steve, those costs, so he didn't believe from his professional standpoint and from our experience that they were out of line.
Anyway, let me continue. If in fact I were going to get use of that property, use of that house, and it was going to cost me $50,000, but I would have that prime location, and I would have the property, and I had to put $50,000 into it, I think most people would look at that as, that's a deal. I mean, that's really a pretty good deal that nobody else in town is going to, nowhere else in town can you get a deal like that. And, my commitment is two things. I was glad that you signed up, because I thought it was just a splendid idea. But that house, according to Joanne King, may well be the oldest house in town. So my commitment is that we keep the house and we restore the house. Secondly, we took the barn down with the understanding that the barn would be rebuilt. And that's the second thing, is that the barn was taken down and the barn will be rebuilt. And if in fact this doesn't work out, for you guys, then I think the third thing is, from my point of view, is we go find somebody that can make good use of that property and follow through on those two things. Because the house isn't going to be torn down, the house is going to be restored, and we'll find someone to do that. And there's no shortage of folks out there who are keen to get into a location like that. And I wish it was you, but there was no way what you wrote in that letter, for me, one of this group, but that's going to happen.
I guess I'll address a couple things. The first is that when we originally looked at that property, we had talked to, about the parking lot being reconfigured. It was not reconfigured. And it was built as proposed, which created a smaller footprint for the barn. And as far as the house, we're not saying that we wouldn't do that we wouldn't rehab the house. We offered suggestions to make a fully handicap accessible new structure that would serve the needs in one building, or that the house would be rehabbed and would only be able to serve this portion of the need and would not be fully handicap accessible, et cetera, because you are dealing with an older building, as you stated. So this wasn't saying that, this was creating options to move forward.
Just a question on that. You say that you proceeded to initiate the grant funding process. How much are you applying for?
We have applied for $230,000.
And of that
That we potentially can apply for.
So you apply for $230,000, but you do not know what you'll be awarded?
Correct. It's always a shot, and you hope that you get it, you hope you get the full amount, but you're happy for whatever you get, ultimately.
Other questions?
I'll just be brief, Diane. When you first came out and said you wanted to use that property, I was excited as well. And, I did read your letter, and I appreciate everything you've done up to this point to try to make it happen. But my personal standpoint is close to Bill's, that I would not want to see that house come down.
Okay.
And if there's other options that we can work around to keep the house and still make it viable for you to be able to use, I'm all for it. But, with reading it, that, again, I wouldn't be in favor of taking it down. And maybe there's something else that we can come up with to make it work for you, but.
I agree, and we're certainly willing to continue to move forward on that. But again, it would be what could be done in that structure, which will be more limited.
Right.
And again, I'm here to discuss that, not to say that we're not willing to move forward,
Okay.
not to say that we're not willing to go for the funds to make the project happen, because we are. We think it's a great opportunity, and we want to partner with the city. I was here to propose options of what makes sense. What makes sense for the community, for the city, for our organization, and the people that we serve. Obviously, a new building structure would put everything under one roof and would be cost efficient and fully handicap accessible. That was the only thing I was presenting, not that we would move forward to utilize that home.
When you say the renovation of the existing home for commercial use will only enable MCH to fulfill one of its desired purposes for retail space, what would that be? Because you said this will not allow cafe, coffee roasting, or bike rental. So what would be the retail purpose if it was renovated?
Yeah, the structure itself is limited in that the second floor is really not usable, according to Steve, under the new commercial designation. So then you're left with the first floor footprint, which is rather small. It's about, what do you say, 300 square feet?
First floor?
Yeah.
800, 800.
Yeah, not with the, because you can't use the second. Yeah, it's very, very small footprint. You can't use the basement because it doesn't have the ceiling height. So that's not usable. And so you're really left with that first floor footprint, which again could lend itself to a retail space. And we're willing to move forward on that and would be excited to do that. But we certainly couldn't use the other spaces that are in the building.
And if the building was renovated, Steve, there's a lot of businesses around town that have a second floor.
You're changing the use. It was a residential use, now it would be a commercial use. You have to create an accessible path to any of the general use areas. If you use the second floor for something, that would be a general use area. If you didn't use it, you wouldn't have to. I'm assuming if that's what we're talking about, we would use the second floor as well for some purpose, then you'd have to create some kind of an accessible route to the second floor, elevator, something like that.
There's a very steep, narrow staircase now that goes from the ground level to the second floor, which I assume was an apartment at one time.
You also mentioned here that if you can't do the cafe and coffee roasting, you can't rent bikes at this location, at this time. I guess, so I'm still going back to my original question, what would be the use there then, that you would propose?
It would be retail, a retail.
Like when you say
on the first
retail,
floor.
like sell,
Things that our individuals make. And it would be made in Medina, that's kind of our concept. Made in Medina, and could be some consignment from other made in Medina locations. But certainly the things that our individuals that we serve make in our programs, in our vocational training and employment programs.
And you say if building, that you're not able to construct a new building in where the barn was located for additional?
It would be very difficult, because it would basically, there's a very small footprint, and the city wants to maintain green space for the park area, which is understandable. And there are limitations with the set-offs. Apparently that building encroached on the property to the south.
So,
The south, and you can't build on that property line. And where you build is about, not even, about in the middle of the embankment
okay.
is where you can build. So you now have a very small footprint from the middle of the embankment to the parking lot. And still maintaining that green space in the back.
It still seems to me, though, that when we sat down with the architect and with the planning director, we had that parking lot drawn the way it was built. And we looked at that exact space for the barn, and it was your idea to make the barn quite a bit bigger at the time.
I agree, Bill, that it was my idea to make it bigger, but unfortunately, the redrawing of the parking lot did not happen. It's drawn, as it was drawn, is the way that it was built. And that was obviously a city decision, and so unfortunately, you can't expand it north and south. You would have to build a bowling alley, and again, you would take up substantial green space with a bowling alley footprint.
let me ask you a question, the setback. You, Mr. Vogel, were you saying that we have a setback requirement? I mean, isn't this gonna be, I guess I don't know if it's public facilities zoning, but there's 0 lot lines. I mean, you could build right on the property line. I guess I'm confused a little bit.
Yeah, building code would allow it, but you'd have to have a fire rated wall on that side, no windows, no doors, or if you did put windows and doors, they have to be rated, very expensive. I talked about that.
But that's on the side where you can't get in anyways, because it's somebody else's property.
Yeah, you wanted windows on this side.
You need light, especially if you're building a long, narrow
Well, I guess,
structure.
I'm just questioning the narrowness of it. I guess it would be the same width. That's what I'm getting confused about. Because,
You could build it up to the lot line, but it would be special construction and no openings, or if you had openings, it'd have to.
just on the one wall, on the south wall.
Yeah.
Well, I was gonna bring up how you specify, or you stated bowling alley type of building, but, and I know you're concerned with light. I mean, skylights are an option maybe that will still be able to secure the back wall, but yet still give you maybe enough light in the facility. And how much square footage were you gonna need for the barn or that structure down there? What
We had
was your-
originally,
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
we had originally talked about, like 2,000 square feet is what I recall, and I don't remember the exact number when we met. Perhaps Bill does, but that's what we were thinking about. It's about 2,000, because again, it was originally discussed for a cafe and the coffee roasting and the bike rental. So, you know, it has to have sufficient space to accommodate the number of individuals that hopefully would be utilizing those particular businesses. So
and there's not enough room on the basement for any type of storage that might take away or allow you more space on that additional structure, that might not have to meet the ADA requirements, that still gives you some additional space, even though it's a low ceiling, but if it's for putting the bikes in at night or something like that, do you still have to meet certain requirements for storage
Like in the
The
rear?
original.
on the existing building?
In the house, the basement.
No, it's not. If you're just storing bikes there, no. Since all you were doing there, you wouldn't have.
It wasn't.
And again, we're an agency that serves individuals with disabilities, so we have to have the handicap accessible.
Right, I didn't know if there was any possibility from the, cutting through the, you know, where there's, is it stairs that go down there, or is that door just level when you come out the bottom there? I'm trying to recall.
Basement, there's a door from the basement out there underneath. And then the stairs usually do go up to the deck in the back, yeah.
Yeah, there's stairs to the back of the house.
Yeah, we're just looking at the size of this room. This is probably about a 45 foot by 35 foot.
1,200 square feet.
Just 1,200 square feet, so yeah. Bigger, the building would be bigger than this room.
Yeah,
It's
we
big, twice as
almost
much.
double
No,
this room.
almost not.
Almost double the size.
And that's what you truly need, is 2,000 square feet.
Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna have those type of uses, you need the space. And again, when we originally talked, we had hoped that we would have that with the footprint.
Well, you know, without Patrick here and without Greg here, you know, it's not, I don't want to disagree with you, but I do, because I don't think that we talked about a much bigger barn. We talked about take the barn down and build a bigger building.
We did.
I don't recall it being 2,000 square feet, and I'm still not convinced about the parking lot, the differences in the parking lot. But the fact is, the house is unchanged from what the house was when we originally discussed the proposal. I mean, the steep stairway, the entrance to the back, building requirements or whatever, we met with your architect. And when we made these decisions about what was possible to do. And to me, it's a non-starter. And I have to preface this with, I'm a big supporter of creative housing, I love what you do, but it's a non-starter if in fact we can't restore that house and put it to good use and reconstruct that barn. I mean, to me, that's, you know, and I think we ought to have this discussion in a small group with the planning director and the engineer and the administration, so we can try to hash some of these things out to see if it's possible. But those two things, to me, those are, I thought, you know, that was the whole purpose of the discussion, was to try to rebuild that, save that barn.
How does that?
Because it is the historic nature of that stuff that contributes to that entranceway, to that walk in the park. That was the purpose, you know, of saving the barn in the first place.
And, you know, Bill, I don't disagree with you that that was the original intent. And to have those two uses in those two separate buildings would be ideal. It doesn't seem that it's feasible to have it in one, in that original structure in the house. But yes, you're right. We did talk about the house, we talked about the barn, but we also talked about a reconfiguration. And I would love to sit down with, we can sit down and discuss this again and revisit exactly what
I
would
think
be
that's
done.
the question. I just want to get the feeling about the proposal, first of all, whether or not to keep or tear it down, and just so we're all on the same page in council, if we're agreeable to, if we all had a vision of keeping the building, first of all. And I know your answer is yes. And
Mine's yes, because I think that's what we went into this with, trying to save that house, so why we
Yeah,
bought that.
my answer is yes, but again, just about with everybody here, I'm sure, creative housing is such a wonderful addition to our community, and I, along with everybody else, was really excited with the initial proposal. So I'm in favor of having another meeting and trying to work this out.
Paul?
Let's keep it. I agree with everybody. You do a fantastic job providing opportunities for folks who otherwise wouldn't have it, but we want to keep the house.
Is there anybody besides Bill that wants to sit in on a meeting with the administration and Diane and discuss?
Since it's in my ward, I'd love to.
Do you, does
Yeah,
anybody else want to
I'm
be involved in
happy
that?
Have those two.
But let me comment. And Diane, I mean, I think we can find something. I'm hoping to make this work, because I still think it's a great idea. Maybe it's not, Bill would like to rebuild a barn, but maybe that's not gonna be the case. Maybe we can still build something
Great.
that has an historic aspect, maybe a little narrow, or maybe a little smaller than what you like, but we could hopefully find some common ground, so, you know, both
Yeah.
facilities will work in your favor, and we can make it happen.
I agree, and I appreciate everybody's comments. We're, as I said, committed to moving forward, and I'll look forward to sitting down, and I appreciate your kind comments about Medina Creative Housing. We certainly do try to do our part in this county to create opportunities, and I appreciate you working with us to help us do that. So Bill, I'll look forward to sitting down with you and the administration.
Thanks, thanks.
Well, him and Mark.
And Mark?
Mr. Huber?
If, I've been contacted a couple of times by the gentleman with the Western Reserve Land Conservancy. They, I think, are over in the Munson House right now, and CDC is, I think that house is going up for sale or is listed. And he's asked me a couple of times about the possibility of being able to utilize the space in this house if things don't work out. And then creative housing, because they're a small operation, they don't need some things that are a little more elaborate that then creative housing is initially discussing in terms of cafe and bike rental. I don't think they have the same ADA requirements. And so if this does not work out, Medina Creative, the Land Conservancy folks might be a reasonable option without having to really change a whole lot in that house.
Well, how much do they use, because it has an upstairs, and what I'm understanding is that Manor Creative Housing really can't have use of the upstairs.
He uses the upstairs of the Munson, we're selling the Munson house now.
How much square feet is upstairs in the Munson house?
I don't know, I'm not good at square feet, it's bigger than, it's fairly large. I mean, he is you know, it's like an office. The nice thing about, he was originally Bill asked about using the upstairs of that house because he operates pretty much kind of an office, but because it's a land conservancy, it kind of works in well with the park, and I know he's keen to keep a location in Medina. And I've talked to him a number of times, you know, since the letter actually, about whether or not he felt they could use the entire piece of property, so.
Well, you investigate that with your discussions and see what the best solution is for either a joint project if possible, because it appears from what I'm hearing is that the upstairs may not be functional for Manor Creative Housing, or the basement, but we don't want to put them in the basement. But so if you could check that out.
We looked
and
at
make
the
a
upstairs,
decision.
we think we could do something with it.
Okay.
But I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I was contacted again too by
Bill?
Western Reserve, right, and I'm glad you guys brought it up. And like you said, maybe there is a joint project there, and Steve, I don't know if Western Reserve's upstairs, just with office space, is there a requirement then that we'll still have to put some kind of access, elevator or whatever
Yeah,
list you gave us, or?
Yeah, I mean, the way that, it's a pretty strict interpretation, I guess, of the code is if you're changing the use, you have, and you're gonna use that area up there as some general use area, you gotta provide accessibility to that area.
But it would be a general use area, or is this just his office and nobody comes to visit him?
Right. Nobody visits.
It's not for the general
I've only been up
public.
there once.
It's just for
Change the light bulb.
him.
Define that accessibility? Define that? What's that? And what does that mean?
Basically,
I mean, I know
you have to have
accessibility means-
accessibility, you have to be ramps that comply, or an elevator, have to, floors that weren't on the ground level. Even stairs wouldn't comply.
Well, if it's for the public, you're saying, if it's for public
Right.
access. This is-
Stairs would not.
Stairs wouldn't work, but what if it's just
He said
not
would not
public?
comply.
What if it's not public? No public people go up there.
It's a different
It's a
standard.
change in use, it was a residential, it was an apartment, I guess we'll call it an apartment, now it's gonna be a business, we would call it business, something.
I guess you could stretch a little bit, it was commercial,
I don't
it was
think a
apartment.
nonprofit is generally called a business.
Well, that's what I was gonna bring up too. I mean, if we had nonprofit in there, does it hit another tier?
But we're not gonna know the answer
Okay.
today, so
Yeah.
let's move
All
on.
residential.
We can talk- Diane, thanks for coming and sharing, and we'll
Thank you.
set up a meeting between Bill, Mark, yourself, the mayor, and whomever else would like to attend and
Great.
discuss the open issues. Okay?
I'll have Don coordinate that.
Thank you. 13-203, authorizing payment greater than $3,000. Mr. Durham.
Yes, if you don't mind, I'd like to take both of these next two together because they're essentially the same thing.
We, as you know, these over $3,000 expenditures, if they don't have a preliminary purchase order, now have to come through council. The first one is just barely over the $3,000, but both of these, I think, really fit, why we had this method to approve them. One was because of construction damage, the other was because of a derailleur. Those aren't things you can really plan for and get your purchase orders in advance. They're things that happen, and you got to deal with them as they come.
So Keith, this is the then and now issue?
Does everybody understand that? So we may be getting a lot of then and now issues depending on our lucky or unluckiness of the events that occur. Is there a motion for the first one?
Move to approve with the emergency clause?
Second, including emergency clause?
Any further discussion on item 13203? All in favor with the emergency clause?
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. The next one, same issue.
Move to approve with the emergency clause?
Second, including the emergency clause?
Any discussion on that one? All in favor with the emergency clause?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. All right, thanks, Keith. The next item we have is 13205, expenditure over $25,000 for the Wingfoot Tire Systems. Who's this? This is Keith again. Nino. Oh, Nino.
Thank you, Mr. President. Originally, we had a PO in January, $15,000 as the request indicates, and then in August, we went to the Finance Committee for approval of $225,000. In the meantime, sanitation has shopped at Kaufman Tire as well. North Gateway kind of spread around to get us to the last quarter. We would take this expenditure above the $25,000. They were the cheapest in supply prices, but not to exceed $40,000 till year end is what we're asking.
Questions?
Where's Wingfoot out of?
Wingfoot's out of Brunswick, their actual depot. Kaufman Tires in Seville, next to CPF, North Gateways in Van Township, and locally, because they can't handle the commercial tire and rim. So the bigger vehicles, we go to these three entities in our reference.
Move to approve?
Second?
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. 13206, bids, Damon Drive Storm Sewer Improvements. Who's gonna handle this one since Mr. Patton isn't here?
I can't remember. Were you gonna speak to it?
No.
Fred just finished the drawings. I know it's a long-awaited project. Streets flooding, the storm sewer issues that we've had in the past, and I know the residents and neighbors are looking forward to having this completed.
Questions?
Move to approve?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Item 13 is just a discussion item, the Key Bank property, and I guess, Mr. Huber, if you just give a quick update from what you know, and with Mr. Patton working on obtaining information on it, both survey, and I can essentially light on environmental, but just an update of where we stand.
Patrick contracted with a company to do an environmental assessment. The report was submitted a couple of days ago, I think the last part of last week. The environmental assessment found possible, well, I guess they're not really sure. There was a tank on the north side of the property that they think held oil for a machine shop that was north of the Key Bank property. But they do not know if the tank was removed or not, so they flagged it. Bottom line is the company recommended no second-tier environmental assessment. In speaking with the mayor and Patrick, we recommended that we follow the environmental report and not request a phase 2 environmental assessment, and consider that the contingency is acceptable and move forward with the purchase. With respect to the survey for the building that encroaches, that will be deeded back to the owners on the Key Bank building itself. That survey is not quite completed, but should be soon.
And the anticipated, I guess, once the survey is completed, the anticipated closing date would occur prior to or after the Candlelight Walk? 'Cause the only question I ask that is that if we're gonna put portable restroom facilities, it would probably be the ideal location is to stick it there on that property, since it'll be restrooms the next year. So I don't know if that
Is
would
there
be.
access for a truck to pull in, drop them, and be able
Yeah.
to pull out?
What date are we talking about?
End of
November
November.
22nd.
November 22nd. About a month, a little less than a month.
It's close, I'm not sure.
The,
If we can get it closed, I think it makes sense. It's just,
right, if it
it's
works.
dependent on when they sign it, when they send it back, all those things.
Yeah, if it works, it's great. It'd be a good location for those porta johns to be located.
The owners in California, the escrow agent is not local, so I'm not sure how fast this is gonna turn.
Okay. Any questions?
So there could be a tank and could not be a tank?
Well, I read the report, and they said back in 1915, there was a machine shop located at the property, and they really couldn't tell what happened back in 1915. The only good thing is that, first of all, there's no residential use ever going to occur on that property. The second point is, the property is what's called capped. There's asphalt or pavement over the entire surface of the property, so there's no ability to have contact with the soil. And that's usually what you're really concerned about, is having contact with the soil. And nobody's ever gonna contact that soil unless, and it's maybe during construction, or maybe internally in the building, putting the plumbing in there. I don't know if they'll go down that far or not. But the whole goal is that you do not want the public to have contact with soil, that you don't know if contaminated or not. And back in 1915, I don't know what the rules were back then. I don't think there were any rules back then, so. If that property is contaminated, everything around it is contaminated. So you really can't do anything about it.
Can you do any core samples or anything that?
But if you did core samples and found something, then you maybe have to go next to the building or to the street, you may have to shut everything down. And who knows what's there? It depends if it is or isn't, how far it goes, because you have to keep figuring out where it ends.
You also gotta keep in mind, across the street, and I can't, it's not the old tavern, it's the old, it's the Lance building. That used to be an automotive store, where is it Maria's or Cafe right there in the corner? Not Maria's, excuse me. What's the name of the?
Michelle's.
Michelle's. That used to be a gas station. So I'm sure even if we dug down into the property that we're trying to acquire and got a soil sample, and if soil sample come up contaminated, it may not be from that site.
Right.
Basically what I'm saying.
Right.
And actually, the Chamber of Commerce, I believe, used to be a gas station too.
Correct.
Right. So I want to ask the question of one of our environmental lawyers, since they deal with this day in and day out, what they see as the issues and probabilities, and looking at the end use of the property, and the fact that the property is going to be paved, what would be the realistic approach to doing this? And I think they're going to come back and say, if as long as it's paved, there's really nothing you can do, because you're not going to change the condition as long as it's paved. I think the bigger thing is people don't want people having a residential facility there and open grounds that people can dig in the soil. So, that's if it was contaminated, so. Hopefully it's not, but we don't know the answer to that question. And if it is, I don't know what we could do about it, realistically. I don't know what the answer would be.
Have there been any reports of anybody experiencing any ill effects from like oil seeping up in their surrounding area? Yeah, because that whole area is pretty much covered with some sort of hard surface.
Right, no, I haven't heard anything around there that's been an issue.
I agree, let's not disturb it.
But I'll confirm it with an environmental lawyer just to make sure that what they see normally, because they do a lot of projects for the city of Akron, to see normally what happens.
I'm just thinking of the city buying a project, or buying a building that could be contaminated underneath.
We may already own one, you never know.
Right.
I was gonna say, the whole bank one building that was a gas station.
Right.
Yes, I mean, I don't know what the answers to the questions are.
Just about every street corner.
Yeah.
has a gas station
That's,
at one time.
that's the issue.
It was built on a former dump, so.
Yeah, there's a lot of issues, but I'll confirm that with Mr. Huber. Anything else about the Key Bank property? Oh, we have one more update, and I guess this is from ODOT. And Mayor, I don't know if you want to give the update regarding the Route 42 project.
Right. Council remembers, I think most of you were down here, if not all, And we had some concern with the 4-foot median. And, you know, what could they do to try to widen that for us? We also talked about if it was necessary, could we get rid of the bike path on the east side of the road? Turns out that's pretty expensive to do. Mr. Coyne can correct me if my memory's wrong, but $8 million is property acquisition or
Yes.
design?
I think that was just.
Property acquisition,
Yes.
$2 million is design. If we did away with the bike path now, and even if we created wider bike paths, if it's not at least 10 feet, they don't consider it a multi-use path. Federal funds are paying for the design and the property acquisition 80% of this. So we would be giving up $8 million to change that multimodal path because the federal dollars are paying for the design and the property acquisition with that part of the project. So to redo the whole project there would put all of that in jeopardy. That being said, we asked them then to keep it in so we don't lose our $8 million. And there are 3 sections, typical sections there. If you understand the engineering drawings, or if you're like me and you understand color pictures better, it shows you. But what it does is it's a 20-foot median, except where you get to the turn lanes, and then it narrows to a 4-foot median.
No, 9 foot.
Opposite direction, I'm sorry.
9 foot. You get the right one?
Probably
The
It's a-
width of the median?
not. Yeah,
The width of the median is gonna be 20 foot at the widest spot and 9 foot at the
9
narrowest.
foot where it narrows, right.
At the narrow spot, which before they came with a 4-foot median.
Right.
Now it's 5 foot bigger. And we still keep the 10-foot multi-use path. What changes is that on both sides, you have the tree lawn or the devil strip. And those are both 4 foot 6 inches, which you can still put trees in them on both sides of the street rather than what they had as trees on one side of the street.
Right.
And now the width of the grassed area on both sides will be equal. It'll be 4.5 feet, you keep your 10-foot trail, and plus you have a wider median in the middle in which to make a determination of what you want to do with respect to that.
So in that median, then you could plant trees?
Yes. And the other point that we talked about at the meeting is that we would not have ODOT and the general contractor for ODOT do the landscaping within the median, because what they would have to do is bid it out to the contractor, and the contractor would bid it out to the subcontractor and add a profit on top of that, so we would be actually paying more to have it landscaped. So we're telling them to take the landscaping out of it, and the city will do that, hopefully in conjunction with their project with our own contractor and our own bidding process to save some money with respect to filling in those median islands in the middle.
Because that's gonna be totally our expense.
That would be totally our expense in any event, right?
So to have them do it and add all the profit fees with going through multiple people, we figured we could do it better ourselves and choose exactly what we want in there.
And
Where
save-
are we
save
on the
money.
lights?
The lights are, we're kind of far away from that yet. There hasn't been an answer if they're in the middle or the outside. There's still discussion of how big they could be, how small they could be, should they be decorative? I mean, that all has to be determined yet. That is not,
Well, this looks like a good,
Their problem, I'm sorry,
this looks like a much better plan than what we had.
The only question I have is, this new design, does this still maintain the turn lane lengths that they originally recommended? It does.
yes.
one thing it changes is that we narrowed one side. It was 9 foot 6 in one of the right-of-way grassed areas, and the other side was 4.6. We just took 5 feet off of that because we were asking, why is this so much wider? And then we were able to keep the path in there. They came back with a design, and it's all within the same right-of-way. You do not have to purchase any additional right-of-way, which is key, and we still be able to use the federal funds because we're not eliminating the bike path, which I was unaware of until that meeting, that if we didn't put the bike path in, we lose 80%. I had no idea that that was the case.
Right. Well, and the other thing is we've sold it, to get it approved through the state as one of the projects selected with the monies they're getting from the turnpike every time we've talked about the multimodal path. And so now to go in and say, no, we're changing all of that, just puts us in jeopardy of having the whole project wiped out, and just don't think that's a good risk. So,
And I think in our-
well, the lights and those other things, it's not that those things aren't important, but they're, as John mentioned, they're far enough down the line. What they need to know for this is, do we have to just start fresh because this isn't acceptable? Or if this is still workable within the existing right-of-way that they started, then they can continue with the plans and keep the project moving. So then we'll have the choices of lights and we're gonna have to discuss, just so council's aware, driveway accesses. Some of those driveway accesses that are currently open will not remain open. They're going to encourage people to use some of the back drives and come out at the existing lights. The plan is to move the light at the Walgreens a little bit further north and align it so it's not so close to the Harding intersection. So there will be some significant adjustments along the way there. We'll discuss them as they come through, but the main thing to keep the project moving is this acceptable now, with the modifications made.
And I believe one of the representatives at our last meeting, we had our sole meeting on this, I think they said something about we could possibly lose federal funds if we change it. How long is this 20-foot median? I mean, as I look at the aerial here, and I know we don't have the whole project in front of us, but how?
I mean, I don't think it's that long. I think the 9-foot median is gonna be the dominant feature of the whole line. The 20-foot median is probably half the length of the 9-foot going throughout because of the turn lanes at the intersections. So I don't know the exact distance.
And I think that's farther north also.
But they have to have long enough approach lanes to have the turn miles in there. But I don't know how long the 20-foot, I can't imagine. But the whole goal in my mind was you want to have 4-foot. If you go up to I-71 and Windfall Road, that's like a 4-foot median with nothing in there, that little brick, I mean, that little concrete, that doesn't look too good. I don't think we want
What,
to.
the wall you're talking?
Beyond the wall, there's an area that has a small 4.5-foot, maybe 5-foot little concrete curb.
Actually, if you look at this, Mark, if you look at the two drawings, the colored drawings,
Yes.
it looks like it goes to the entrance off Court Street, the Target between Ruby Tuesdays and Eden Park. That's where it widens to 20 feet and continues until you get to what's today the Wendy's entrance.
And that's it, that's the only 20-foot area.
Well, because of the turn lanes
Right.
at each of the other intersections, I would say that, that's probably it.
And I'll bring it,
Denny mentioned north of the city. North of the city will not match this because the township is not interested in having green space or median, so they're doing their own thing up there.
So the
It will not
township
necessarily match
doesn't
that.
follow through into the township?
No, they don't want to do this. They don't, we can't make them either.
Right.
So this is gonna end at, what's, Ledgewood there, or
Yes.
Hillview? It'll end at Hillview?
Right, Hillview on one side, Stonegate on the other.
Right.
Yes, sir.
That's where we'll.
So the bike path ends,
Oh, no, the bike path is good. It's just the amenities in the middle of the road
The
that we're
aesthetics.
doing.
so they're gonna get the 4-foot, or they're gonna get the 4-foot median?
I don't know.
I don't think they get any median.
No median.
No
They
median.
might
It's
get
just
all
gonna be
pavement.
open road, which we don't want to have in the city.
Yeah, I think this is a good, this really does address, a lot of the aesthetics and the possibilities for what we can do in the middle, and at the same time, really deals with what the mayor was talking about last time, which was the safety concerns and improving the traffic flow. That's a good plan.
So are we okay with this
well,
design?
yeah, when Bill brings up safety concerns, I mean, you think a 4-foot gap there is safe for pedestrians on the trail?
What do we mean a 4-foot gap?
Or the 4-foot green space between the, right, 4.5 feet?
4.5 feet. Well,
Between the road and somebody using the
well, it's
sidewalk.
4.5 feet plus 2 feet, so, because it's a little bigger than that.
Okay.
It's
My next question is,
6.5 feet.
so when this project's done, and I know the mayor talked about they're looking for people to use the access, through Drug Mart and Giant Eagle on one side, I assume. I mean, those are at their limits now, I think. So I have a little concerns there that, it sounds good.
They're gonna
but-
control the access points, because the more access points you control, the less chance you have of people slowing to turn in, people pulling out and not yielding, which is causing the accidents. So part of the redesign is to create a corridor with less points of accidents.
Right, well, so people will be using those side lanes, which are private property lanes, I guess, which, to me, I mean, there's a lot of money being spent here, so I hope when it's done, traffic's flowing better, I mean, the aesthetics are there. but I hope we're not focusing more on the aesthetics than the actual function of that area. 'cause
I
it
think the
needs some
ODOT,
help.
those function first,
Nope.
so.
It looks like we've got the same functions that we had
Well, that's-
basically what we had before,
Right.
which is just improve the median and the.
And more maintenance.
And we got the 10-foot wide path, and we got trees on both sides of the road. So in that area where people are walking, we'll just plant a lot of big trees, and that'll protect people from the traffic.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Any plans to be able to save any of those trees that are along that road?
Sorry, that's a question for Jansen, I'm sorry. I can't tell you whether or not he.
Well, I didn't know if
can
there was
swarm
any
for 2
discussion.
years or-
I didn't know if there was any discussion.
Not yet.
Okay.
All right, it sounds like everybody's okay with this plan, so you can inform ODOT coming
Thank
forward.
Ready? I'm gonna make a motion to enter into executive session at 6:55 PM for the purpose of preparing for, conducting, or reviewing negotiations or bargaining sessions with employees concerning their compensation or other terms and conditions of their employment.
We're gonna enter into recess now, we'll come back, but we won't,
Roll call.
I know, we won't take any action, so Katie, can you take a roll call?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, we do it there.
Because we have to do a roll call now.
Okay. Lamb,
Here.
Hilbert,
Yes.
Shields,
Yes.
Coin,
Yes.
Simpson,
Yes.
Rose,
Yes.
Coniston.
Yes.
Okay,
Are you staying here? John?
we'll stay here, yes.